You think of it as going, from your living room down into your basement, and even the basement has a basement. Matter of fact, that was sort of Jung's major idea. Was, Freud said, well, you can go into the basement and it's full of your personal memories. And you are largely determined by those early memories that influence now the rest of your life. And you can work through that the rest of your life. You can go to therapy for years and try to work through your mother and father issues and all that sort of thing. Very personal for Jung, for Freud. But for Jung, he said there's an additional floor. The unconscious has an unconscious. And that unconscious, that second unconscious, is collective. The images and the content, the material that fills up that room, so to speak, is more collective in nature. And I'm going to try to give you a sense for what those are, what that material is, how Jung thought about it today. I'm going to try to apply it to our story of Jesus as I want to move into it next week. So today we're going to look at Jung's individuation theory very briefly, and some pagan or Hellenistic archetypes that will provide background for our reading of the story. Jung's notion centers around this idea of individuation. Individuation is just basically becoming an individual. That's what he meant by it, or becoming undivided, becoming healthy and whole. Jung's psychology was an individual psychology. He looked at the person. I think today that's probably, I won't say it's passé, but it's, we're much more in the social side, much more in the cultural. What did I do? Oh, I knew it was coming. I knew it. I just like,
Shame on you.
When is it going to happen? All right. Oh, now, see, now I have to go through this whole thing. What did I do? Cancel. Oh, my gosh. Last time it just shut me down cold. It was like, that was it. I was done. So we'll see how we're doing. And here's your big word for the day. Jung's psychology is teleological. And that's a big word that just simply means its goal, well, I was going to say goal would be a simple word to substitute for teleos. Teleos is a good biblical word, by the way. When Paul said that Christ was the end of the law for salvation, that word end is telos or teleos. It's the goal. It's the thing it was all driving to. It was destined to get there. And I think that's a huge point for Jung, that the psyche, our personality, is driven by a destiny. It's not determined, as Freud said, by the past, but it's really being pulled by the future. And what a concept, but I love that, And I think that fits nicely in sort of with biblical tradition anyway. So we're being pulled by, it's like the seed, the tree is already in the seed. That's the idea. So the tree of what you are in your full potential is already in the seed of who you are now. And you're just being pulled toward that future. And that was his whole orientation in looking. So you could see from that he was really interested in these archetypes, this collective dimension, because this is what was pulling us toward sort of a larger unfoldment of who we are. For Jung, the ego is sort of your adapted self. It's the self that we're aware of. It's all the skills, the traits, the abilities that we've developed to sort of get along in the world. Some people can do that through being assertive. Some people can do that from, by being passive and shy. There's all different kinds of ways that we adapt to the world. But what is adapted are the traits, the qualities, the attitudes that we're comfortable with, that we know about, that become part of our conscious self. But there's an unconscious that is in many ways the opposite of that. So if I develop trait, A, then trait negative A is going to go into my unconscious. And it sits in the unconscious, and it sort of collects archetypes, and I haven't talked about them, but it collects these powerful images, and then it gets sort of projected back up into consciousness, knocks on our door, maybe through a dream, maybe through some circumstance, and it says, hello, don't forget me, you're over here, but this is a part of who you are too, and you have to deal with this. And so there's this, he used the word compensatory relationship between the unconscious and the conscious. The conscious becomes one-sided. We just get comfortable in our little box, you know. We do things certain ways all the time. We get limited. And the unconscious then sort of takes a role of, I'm going to compensate for that by bringing you the stuff that you are habitually not wanting to pay attention to. And it's an interesting kind of push-pull that we wind up having with our own self. And I suppose that's a definition of neurosis.
Randy, could you give an example of maybe, whether it be personal or not, of a trait that'd be an A, and then what would be the trait that'd be an A?
Yeah, A would be, for me, shyness, quietness, staying to myself, and non-A would be being assertive, being extroverted. You know, in Jungian terms, introversion sort of captures one whole side of this. That part of us that likes to pull in and is at home in the world of thought, in the world of, you know, maybe our own little world. And then extroversion is the, and just to say the very opposite, the person who's at home in the outer world, but has no inner world. And you know, I'm sure we've met and known those too. At the extremes, they can both be debilitating attitudes. So if you're one, your unconscious is always going to be pulling you toward the other. Okay, so that's the dialectical relationship. There's another big word. I said one, but I'm slipping into dialectical. Just means a sort of push-pull between opposites. And that's how Jung conceptualized the personality, as involved in this sort of push-pull. We're fragmented, we're one-sided, and there's this compensatory relationship. So the goal for Jung, the goal of individuation, to become your own individual, is to move from being fragmented and one-sided to being whole and integrated. And that takes learning how to communicate, recognize the unconscious in all its forms, and somehow find a place for that in our conscious existence. He talked about unconscious complexes. The word complex is important. It just simply means that the material in the unconscious organizes itself. And it was, think of it like maybe a planet or something in, you know, floating in space, a cold piece of ice that gathers dirt and, you know, gases and things around it. They all constellate around this spinning center. And that's sort of how these archetypes are, these complexes of the unconscious are. They have all kinds of ways of connecting. You know, we can get triggered into certain kinds of memories and certain kinds of fears and things in ways that don't make sense to us. And it's sort of, they're just loosely connected material. It might be connected by an emotion. It might be connected by a physical similarity between, let's say, an early trauma and a recent event. You might see a physical resemblance. It might be a smell. Have you ever had a smell that just took you somewhere? Brought you in, oh man, when I was 5, you know, I remember going to Coney Island and smelling the popcorn. I don't know, you know, that got carried in and pulled into the orbit of that complex. And so it becomes a trigger that brings you back into that complex in some way. And that's sort of how the unconscious works. So there's this personal and collective material. Now we're kind of getting to where we need to go, and that's to the archetypes. Jung was very big on archetypes, or developed, I would say, the notion. He didn't invent it, but he certainly developed it. What are archetypes? It's going to be a very important idea for us. So let me give you Jung's definition. Archetype is a pre-existent, inherited form. Or, if you want to say it another way, they're just psychic images. They're images in the psyche. They have an affect to them. They have an emotional content to them. When you encounter an archetype, it evokes something. It just gets a response at you. It gets a rise at you. You know, they have an energy to them. They're complex. They have many sides to them. I mean, talking about 3 different archetypal complexes today, I'm going to watch the clock very carefully because I got to get these 3 in order to be ready for next week. As I said, they organize into these complexes. There can be more than one archetype. It's very hard to define and to distinguish archetypes. You know, what is an archetype? Well, the mother is an archetype. That's a huge archetype. I want to talk, if I get time today, about my own relationship to the mother. Father is an archetype. King is an archetype. Orphan. Orphan is a big archetype. The sage, the crone, the innocent, the child, the hero. We'll talk about the hero today. The fool, the trickster. Notice the word "the" in front of all of them because these are collective figures. They're not really personal. They're just these generic sort of shared images that have a larger-than-life feel and air about them. Their roles, maybe. There's all kinds of ways and all kinds of things that can become archetypal. There are archetypal images, people, roles. Relations can be archetypal. The mother-child, I'm going to talk about it just in another minute or 2. Got lots of pictures, by the way. This is the hard part. We'll get to the pictures in about 2 or 3 minutes. So I appreciate your patience. I know this is, we're sludging through here. There can be archetypal relations, such as mother-child, father-son. Archetypal processes. We're going to talk about the hero's journey. That's kind of a process. You can lay it out in terms of step 1, step 2, step 3, what happens here, and where's it going. There are archetypal numbers. That's the 3rd complex I want to talk about today, the number 4. The number 4 for Jung is huge, and I submit to you that the number 4 is also huge in the gospel. And I'm going to show basically my interpretation of Mark is a drama in 4 acts. And you'll see why I think that's so important next week. And finally, there are archetypal systems. In the ancient world, the zodiac was this incredible, I mean, just mind-blowing symbolic system that contained so many elements in it. I couldn't even begin to talk about it today. So now what I want to do is, it's 10:02. Okay, I've got about, I think you said 10:20, right? 18 minutes to go. And then we're going to do questions and answers. And those of you that need to leave can do so. But this is sort of a break in the presentation, so I'm going to take just a minute and ask if there are any questions about Jung's psychology of individuation and how that happens. Anybody?
I don't want to hog it, but I'm gonna. Did he have any idea where the archetypes came from? I mean, why they would even develop in human consciousness at all?
I think that's that sort of ultimate metaphysical question that he sort of danced around.
Yeah.
And he had bottom-up theories. That is to say that an archetype is very similar to an instinct in animals. Where do instincts come from? How does the bird know where to fly? It's inherent in nature. So he would say, how does the heart note beat 60 times a minute? Yours does, mine does. Where's the intelligence in that? He's not really trying to answer the metaphysical question of God or source, right. But he's saying that it's sort of a baseline reality of both the psyche and nature. Matter of fact, I'm glad you bring that up because I had a mantra this morning. I didn't give it to you, but I'm going to give it to you now. I came to, I don't do mantras, but I had one this morning, and it was nice. And I thought, I'm going to do, and here it is: psyche, myth, nature. Say that with me: psyche, myth, nature. Jung connected those 3 in a very creative, very powerful way. So what's at the base of the archetypes? Nature. What's at the base of nature? Mystery. That's it.
Yeah.
So, but he would say the psyche is nature. Just as a scientist is looking at the biology of the body, Jung thought he was looking at the structure of the psyche, the very basic forms that influence how we even perceive time and space and reality. Sort of he was following Comte in that. I don't want to get into that, but that's what he was doing. So that's the best answer I can give.
That's a good answer.
All right, so anybody, any others? Yeah.
You said at one point that Jung, his whole philosophy or psychology today is not that much in vogue. So
Right.
what's in vogue these days? I mean,
Well, I don't know if there are any therapists here who could answer that question better than I could. Things like systems therapy, cognitive therapy, psychology, I think, has moved much more to a medical model. So, you know, the whole notion of medication is very important. How the brain is organic, how is the brain functioning, how can we medicate that? I mean, you know, sort of that's one part of it. Jung now is more important to humanities departments than he is to psychology departments today. And same with Freud. You're much more likely to have a class on Freud in the humanities department than you are in the psychology department. And that's just the way it's gone. These guys were cultural analysts. They didn't just analyze individuals, but they analyzed culture and history and where consciousness was, how consciousness evolved and how culture has evolved over time. And so that's what makes them important for, you know, my degree is in humanities. So, well, go figure. So I'm not a psychologist, but there's that whole part of Jung that's so important, I think, to the work that a lot of us are doing. Psyche, myth, nature. Because he connected the psyche to nature, and he also connected it to the images of religion. I use the word myth, it's just a catch-all term. But he connected those symbols and that whole world to the real world of who we are as individuals and the larger world of what the nature of nature is. And that's a wonderful accomplishment. Okay, so images, here we go. Mother and child, first archetypal complex. Now we're sort of going back into the ancient world, because this now will be background for the story of Jesus. All of us here, you know, who spent many years in the church, or just a few, have gotten the biblical background, and I'm just not going to take time to do that. And you all know the story. You know Moses, you know Adam, you know David, you know the Exodus, you know the Ten Commandments, you know all the archetypes of the Bible that find their way into the Gospels. And you know, that's great. Did we go again?
Yeah, just wiggle your...
Yeah, it's out of time.
Yeah.
So I'm going to spend my time in a whole culture world that you haven't gotten much exposure to, because I know there's just a bias. There's a bias in biblical studies and scholarship against really looking at the surrounding, quote, pagan world, because somehow that's not supposed to be, Christianity is supposed to be pristine and unique and untouched by this, but it's not. And that's kind of what I want to show. Again, to balance a one-sidedness in our perception of what these images and stories and symbols are all about. So here we go. The mother and child. Pieta, I don't know. Pieta. Yeah, I is an A. All right, well there it is, and this is an incredible masterpiece. And, you know, Michelangelo, circa, what, 1500s. And here's Jesus who's returned to the mother. This is such a huge archetype, and it pervades the ancient world. The child who is born of the mother, leaves the mother, but comes back to the mother. This is the hero's journey. I just said it in one short sentence. And Jung is huge on this. He gets onto it, and he's really develops it quite nicely, I think. This is a Hellenistic. This is a poor image. I'm sorry, but it's a Hellenistic Greek statue of, I believe, Isis and Horus, the mother and the child. Predates Christianity by quite a few centuries, I would say. On the left is the Egyptian version of that. It goes back even before the Greeks by centuries, millennia, actually. And then here, of course, is Mary and Jesus. And you can see the sort of, the images speak for themselves. Here is this is supposed to be the woman clothed in the sun and the moon and the stars in Revelation 12 with child. It's interesting. I mean, you can see, again, the same archetypal complex is being, these elements are stirring in here. I had an older one. I had one from Egypt I had to take out because it was too many pixels, I guess. It was crashing my program. But it showed her with the disc. I think if I say this, everybody's seen it. You've seen a picture of Isis, you know, with the sun disc on her head, right? With the two bull horns, and then the sun is, you know, the woman clothed with the sun. And again, this is an archetype, and it's in the Bible, you know, amazingly. What does it mean? Who is it? Who is she? We always want to identify, well, it's Mary, or it's so-and-so, it's who. We want to make it concrete. Archetypes are not concrete, they're ethereal. They just slip through your hands. They have so many permutations and forms. That's part of their charm, I would say, part of their power, is that they keep reconstituting themselves in new circumstances all the time. Here's a modern, I just came across this one. Shakira, gorgeous gal, dressed like the mother and child, like the Madonna and Child. Of course, you know, there was another gal before her named Madonna who used to fuss around with religious images, got in a lot of trouble. I think that, but this is art. I mean, you know, I'm not saying it's good art, but it just happens to be something I ran into. And in a way, she's sort of mixing archetypes here. You know, she's more like Aphrodite than she would be the mother. And yet she's, you know, dressed to kill and gorgeous, and yet she's the Madonna, the mother with the child, the virgin. And I, you know, promised I would do something personal, so here it is. Boy, I don't know if I can do this. For time and for nothing else. This is the inside of a Catholic church. It's just, I could have picked some far more ornate ones. The mother is the womb. The mother is the nurturing archetype. The mother is that supportive world that envelops the child, that gives nurture and sustenance to the child. And every one of us, in some hidden sense, is that child that wants to find their way back to that womb. And even though the masculine ego wants to go out and slay dragons and achieve great things and be independent, say, yes, this is me, there's still secretly a part of us that wants to return. Now, in the archetypal world, the mother is the keeper of the mysteries. That is to say that she's the initiator. She's the one that initiates into the mysteries. And you don't get into the mysteries until you come through the mother. And in a sense, the church itself is a return to the womb of the mother. And you get that in the Catholic Church a little more, and I'm talking about physically. When you walk into a Catholic church, you get it. You know, I'm walking in, I'm re-entering the womb. I mean, it's just so containing, and such a cosmos of symbol and support and nurture that it's overwhelming. I grew up Catholic, so I can say that. And when I, you know, my mother passed away when I was 8 years old. I think I mentioned that before. And I'm convinced now, but only now, late in life, after looking at this for many years and going through my own religious adventure, that that loss created a sort of archetypal stirring in me that left me longing for the mother. And that probably is at the core of my dare I say, even a fascination with and even addiction to religion, starting when I was 19 years old. There was just a part of me, you know, my aunt, when I was 8 years old, God bless her, and I will say, I have to say this is very personal, but my mother and my aunt, they were beautiful women. They were all from Spain, Madrid, just beautiful women. Not only beautiful, but they were just, they were saints. That's all I know how to say it. They were wonderful people. And I remember, excuse me, You know, my aunt telling me my mother not was passing away, but was going to heaven. Now, for an 8-year-old, how do you take that in? What does that mean? Your mother's going to heaven. It can only mean one thing. There was another world. There was a place I wanted to go to. She was going somewhere I wanted to go to. And I think later on, somehow for me, those archetypes, if you will, not my mother, but the mother. And this is the thing, and now I'm going to come back to you in a little bit. The mother gets mixed up with our mother, and we can't tell the difference between the two. And we think we're thinking about our mother, but it's really the mother that's coming through, because as these collective energies or images rise up, they sort of attach in the more mundane, concrete world of our consciousness. They grab onto a more immediate image. That's my mother. So now my mother is all messed up with the mother, and somehow I'm missing the mother and want to get back to the mother. And religion was the container for that. My mother had taken me to Catholic Church. I got it at a visceral level that this was womb, and that this was mystery, and that she was initiating me into the mystery. And so my philosophical mind, you know, and all, it just sort of fell into that at an early age, and I've been sort of a religious guy ever since. Okay, so moving along, that's my personal story. But sometimes the mother who is nurturing at one stage of life can become devouring at another stage of life. Remember I said the archetypes are complex. They're many-sided. They have dark and light sides. So the mother who nurtures can become the mother who devours. Here's a picture of Giselle fighting the queen. If you ever, the dragon, who is the queen, has become the dragon. And in a way, for me, I think the mother church became dragon, something I had to slay. Because again, if you're trapped in the nurturing, you want to get out. There's something about it that becomes very confining. And all of a sudden, what was, you know, a positive archetype can turn into a negative one. This is from the movie Enchanted, by the way. It's a great movie, if you haven't seen it. And now we're into the hero. This is the second complex, and I got 3 minutes, and you know I can't do 2 whole archetypes in 3 minutes.
So we've heard.
But the hero now has to slay the dragon. This is Odysseus, and he is slaying the suitors in his story. By the way, there are so many parallels between the Gospel of Mark and the story of Odysseus, and I wish I had time to really flesh them out, but I don't. I'm going to just give you a couple of hints. Here's a modern-day Odysseus, 2001: A Space Odyssey. The man's name is, anybody know this character, what his name was? You'd be good. Who and how? And we'll recall, if you will, here's Bowman, all contained in the computer womb. And he's ready to be born into his own, whatever it is, his own heroic manhood or hero-ness. And here he is now where he has to really come back. You remember he had to shoot himself out of the pod to get back to Hal, because Hal was going to kill him. That's it. That's all there was to it. Hal had become no longer the nurturing archetype, but the dragon. And so he had to slay Hal. Okay, so we're getting up to the end, a couple minutes. That's a quick hero's journey. The hero's journey is solar, it's masculine, it's ego, it's breaking away from that nurturing container and establishing the separate self, you know. It's the warrior. It's the sportsman, it's all of that. There's so much of that in our culture. It's just pervasive. But like the sun, remember, psyche, myth, nature. Like the sun, it turns at midday, the hero's journey. It turns back toward the mother, who is the keeper of the mysteries of death and renewal. So there's a wonderful quote, I think I might, let's see if I can find it here. That's not the one. Okay, here. The god hero, symbolized by the spring zodiac,
Page
Aries and Taurus. What?
Page 3.
Page 3. Okay, thank you. Page 3 in your handout, right in the middle. This nice big fat quote here. The god hero, symbolized by the spring zodiac, Aries and Taurus, descends to the lowest point in winter, overcomes it, and having passed beyond the summer solstice, is himself overcome, as if by an unconscious longing for death. Nevertheless, he is divided within himself, and his descent and approaching end therefore seem to him like evil designs of the sinister mother, who secretly lays a poisonous snake in his path to undo him. However, it is not the mother who lays the poisonous worm in our path, but life itself, which wills itself to complete the sun's course, to mount from morn to noon, and then crossing the meridian to hasten toward evening, no more at odds with itself, but desiring the descent and the end. And now you can begin to see, I hope, how this archetypal story permeated in ancient myth and all these images can begin to describe the gospel. And that is how what I'm going to lay out tomorrow. The gospel in 4 acts: morning, afternoon, evening, and night. So it is time for a last round of questions. If you need to leave, now is the time to do it. And I'm going to take questions for the rest of the session. Any questions?
Question. This gets into one of the medical side. What part of the brain conjures these archetypes? Are there different parts of the brain? Is it possible to kind of quiet the brain?
You know, according to James Hillman, who's a sort of post-Jungian, consciousness is consciousness of the body. Not consciousness about the body, but consciousness of the body. So there are multiple seats of consciousness. To say it's the brain, I don't think would be an archetypal way of saying it. That's a medical way, maybe, you know, some kind of empirical way of saying it. I had, in my last presentation, which I skipped, I didn't have time, was a picture of the heart. And I said in it, this is a heart, it's a muscle, it pumps blood. Then I had 2 silhouettes, one of a woman, one of a man. The woman was an older lady who received a heart transplant. And after receiving, this is a true story, after receiving the transplant, developed a sudden interest in chicken McNuggets, bowling, and motorcycles. The silhouette of the guy, it turns out, after some research, the guy who donated the heart was a younger man who, guess what, was a motorcycle rider who loved chicken McNuggets. I think pool was another one. She started shooting pool. This is a heart. It pumps blood. Really. It pumps blood. Well, there's something that's connecting these 2 people that's more than a muscle that pumps blood. There's consciousness in the heart, of the heart, that somehow now is transmitted. Yeah.
A lot of the images seem sort of male and female.
Yes.
And yet, I know, knowing some females, that they undergo the same process.
Absolutely.
How did Jung, I mean, I know he characterized them that way, but was he of the mind that it was beyond female, male, and how did he wrestle with that?
You know, he took some flack for that,
Yeah.
to be honest with you, because I think some feminists looked at his
Right.
hero's journey and said, this is too masculine.
Right, that's what I was.
But I think that, you know, you have to take him loosely. In other words, this whole notion of the ego, it's the ego that goes out on the conquest. If you want to call that masculine, if you're not comfortable calling that masculine, okay. You know,
Yeah.
but just in ancient culture, it seems that that's how they line up. That the warrior gods are masculine.
Right.
That the initiates into the mysteries, the relating gods, are feminine. Matter of fact, Sophia and Yahweh, in my book, become the 2 not antagonists, but the 2 opposite sides that Christ is reconciling in his own person. So there's a feminine Sophia. It just happens to be that all these, again, the archetype, the material about relating and about wisdom and about life and about cycles, all this is held in the lunar, in the feminine. And that this notion of achievement and aggression and all is held in, and it's just biology. You know, there's testosterone that just makes us more, you know, assertive in that way. So it's hard to get up, it's hard to sort of make all that generic so there's no gender implication.
Right, right.
It just, we're stuck with it, I think. So that'd be the best way I'd say. But it applies to women and men.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah.
And Jung had anima and animus, and I've avoided that because it's too technical, but these are archetypes of the other sex, the male and the woman, and the female and the man, or the feminine and the man, and the masculine and the woman, that we're all wrestling with. So it's just how the form the myth takes, or the journey takes, may differ if you're male or female, but the process is still the same.
That's
Individuation. All right, anybody else? Any other questions? Okay, it's 10:25, I think we're
Wow.
done.
Thank you, Randy.
Okay.
Huh? You can ask Randy individual questions. I'll take them off tape so you won't get recorded.